Mr. Davis,
Thank
you're,
you, Mr.
you're
Chairman.
recognized.
It was a shocking scene. New York Governor...
Dr. Davis, I'm sorry.
That's
Dr.
quite all
Davis.
right.
Dr. Davis.
It was a shocking scene. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo stood at the podium defiantly poking his finger toward the audience. The audience responding with enthusiastic cheers. He had just signed into law the most comprehensive pro-abortion bills in our nation's history. I thought, God help us. That man has just signed the death sentence of thousands upon thousands of children. I'll never forget the disbelief, the disgust, the devastation that I felt at that moment. Have we sunken so low and devalued life so much that we rise to our feet and enthusiastically celebrate, as your counterparts did in New York, the murder of unborn children, many of whom under normal circumstances would just be moments away from being placed in their mother's waiting arms? I never want to see that moment in New York repeated. And I certainly never want to see that moment repeated in our beloved Tennessee. Esteemed senators, I believe that what happened in New York woke a sleeping giant. Lovers of life, including nearly 1 million Tennessee Baptists, have just begun to rally for life. I come before you today representing those Tennessee Baptists, and we want you to know that we stand for life. Just 3 weeks ago, the Tennessee Baptist Mission Board launched a petition initiative called I Stand for Life. Through that, thousands of Tennessee Baptists and almost 1,000 pastors to date have indicated their support for legislation protecting Tennessee's most vulnerable citizens. I believe the bill before you today does just that, and on behalf of those Tennessee Baptists living in your voting districts, from Memphis to Mountain City and Dyersburg to Ducktown, I encourage you to move this bill forward to the next legislative session for approval and then to Governor Lee for his signing into law. As the chosen stewards of the great state of Tennessee, I encourage you to send a clear and convictional message to the people you represent that you too stand for life. Bills like this one are gravely significant because they come down to two fundamental issues: life and our collective responsibility to protect it. The degree to which we as a people value life, all life, determines the strength of the society in which we live. Unfortunately, with Roe v. Wade, our society tipped toward becoming a culture of death. And let's be honest, abortion is largely a violent form of birth control. Tennessee Baptists support the passage of this proposed legislation because it rightly acknowledges and protects life from conception. This fact is self-evident and finds its origins exclusively in the hands of God, our Creator. The Bible's very first chapter tells us God created life in His image. In Psalm 39, "For you formed me, my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb." God told the preacher Jeremiah, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." And we know that God values all life as He sent His only Son to redeem broken humanity. The Bible testifies in its entirety that God is life's ultimate and defining authority. Abortionists argue laws protecting unborn babies encroach on a woman's right to choose. However, that argument exposes a strident desire to take the giving of life from God's hand. For mankind to claim authority in determining when life begins and when it ends is the pinnacle of arrogance. And the trend to redefine an unborn child in ambiguous and impersonal language only exposes the absurdity of our arrogance. Arguments for abortion are shallow and require the denial of facts. Evolutionists through the years have referenced science to support the idea that humanity was created some way, any way other than by God. They've manipulated science to deny God and devalue life. The argument is that if we don't acknowledge the unborn as a child, it is therefore not a child. To pervert the philosopher Descartes, the argument is, I think, therefore it is not. Is it ironic that the more refined science and technology become, the more the two affirm the Bible's declaration? Life begins at conception, and conception results in a child. Honorable senators, for too long, lawmakers have been more determined to pass laws that protect unborn animals than in passing laws that protect unborn children. In our misguided passion for self-autonomy, we have lost the perspective of common sense. We are culturally adrift and in desperate need of an anchor. Cultural stability begins when we recapture the value of life. However, if we continue to devalue life, as we've seen in places like New York, where does it end? At what point are children with birth defects judged of no value and terminated? At what point are the elderly judged of no value and are terminated? And what about ethnic groups? History reveals that genocide has been the fate for these groups deemed of no value by others. What you decide here and in the future about this bill does not just affect unborn children. It has far-reaching consequences that define what Tennesseans say collectively about how we value life now and in the future. Senators, I appeal to you from what I've read in the spring and what you were up against and what you've been threatened with. I beg of you not to be bullied by the threats of economic boycott. And I want to tell you on behalf of Tennesseans, Tennessee Baptist, that we believe it is worth the risk and it is worth the cost to pursue this bill through the courts. You stand at the threshold of a most historic moment. The question facing you today is, what will you do with what you know? History beckons you forward, and your legacy as a public servant is waiting to be written. How will posterity remember you and your colleagues as those stateswomen and statesmen that stood for life when you had the opportunity, are those that were overcome by the risk it takes to change the laws, overcome too much by the threat of that economic boycott? Ladies and gentlemen, I stand with Tennessee Baptist, and together we proudly stand for life. With all sincerity, I pray that you too will stand for life. That is why I strongly encourage you to move this bill forward to become law. Send a clear message to all people everywhere, and especially New York, that together Tennesseans stand for life. On behalf of Tennessee Baptist, thank you for the privilege and the honor of appearing before you today and testifying. And on a personal note, thank you for serving the state of Tennessee as our public servants. Thank you.